Hi, this is Dan Devlin for the Detective Dan Devlin Show, Honorable People, Honorable Nation. You might have caught that there's a little name change in our show, and instead of just using the Dan Devlin Show, we've elected to use the term Detective Dan Devlin Show. And it's true, I have been a real live detective, and that's my mindset. And I've chosen to do that to continually remind us all that that's what we should be doing, and the things that we're trying to cover is to be that detective, that person who is seeking the truth, the real answers, and not be sidetracked by some of the other things that might go on. We want to concentrate on proving fact and using that information, that truth, in order to develop a policy or determine our behavior on a particular topic. The last two programs that we did centered around the fact that we asked ourselves a very important question. That question was, who is named in the Constitution to receive its benefits? You know, the Constitution, and I'll mention it again for those who perhaps haven't seen the prior programs. You know, the Constitution says that there are two groups who are supposed to receive the blessings of liberty. You know, the Constitution says, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to two groups, not one. Those two groups are to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And then it goes on and it says, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. You know, the Constitution in this nation, per the Constitution, were established to accomplish certain things. And the most fundamental of those things is to secure the blessings of liberty to those two groups. And we talked in one of our programs prior to this about the fact that our unborn descendants are named by virtue of the fact of our posterity being named. Our posterity is all our descendants until the end of time. So your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, all those individuals who might have children, they're all in your blood lineage, and they are all your posterity. The founding fathers wanted it known that they were not doing the things that they were doing, risking their lives, drafting a constitution, risking all their property just for themselves. They were doing it so people who followed them, more specifically, their descendants. And we know because we can look at historical documents and we can see where they've used the word posterity and succeeding generations, for example, and they've indicated that we do not want them to be born slaves. So that's an indicator that they certainly knew that their posterity included, at minimum, included their unborn descendants. We also mentioned that it's a fact that currently in the United States, we are allowing the destruction of members of this second group who are specifically named in the Constitution to receive the exact same benefits, which includes protection, as ourselves. And I think it's very important to understand those last two words, ourselves. So when we look at a situation and we're confronted with what should we do, we should be asking ourselves, are we treating our unborn descendants, our posterity, who are specifically named in the Constitution, as ourselves? And what I often like to do is to look at real life situations in order to determine how we want to be treated. And as we do that, we'll take a particular situation and then ask ourselves, if this is the way we want to be treated, how about others? Would they want to be treated that way? So let me give you a scenario. How many people who are watching this program, if they were in a situation where a crowd gathered, the crowd wasn't pleased with you, obviously wanted to hurt you, decided to tie you to a tree, dismember you, and finally kill you? Now, obviously, I know that there's probably no one who wants that to happen to them. But the reality is, in the case of abortion, that's often the procedure that's used in order to exterminate our posterity, who I remind you, and you know, are specifically named in that Constitution. We covered the fact that Roe versus Wade was based upon the principle of not finding any assurance that the word person applied to unborn human beings. And we covered the aspect that they failed to ask the proper question. And that question was, who is specifically named in the Constitution to receive its benefits? When we ask that, like many situations, we have an answer that we will give ourselves that we should be willing to live by. Now, we know that we wouldn't want to be treated the way I described, and yet we allow this to happen to members of the other group who are named in the Constitution. Our politicians are not thrilled with the fact that abortion is an issue that could be solved. They run, whenever given the opportunity, in the other direction, rather than face the fact that they have taken an oath to support and defend the United States Constitution. And that United States Constitution requires them, does not give them the option, it requires them to protect those who are specifically named in the Constitution. Now, I've indicated in prior videos that we need to take action on this. And what can we do? And people come to me and they say, well, the politicians won't act, so there's nothing we can do. Well, we have another program that will be coming up shortly that will deal very precisely with what can be done with people who we put in office who decide that they're not going to do what they're obligated to do. It ultimately comes down to responsibility. Who has the responsibility to keep you safe, for example? And we can look at police officers, we can say Congress, we can say, our parents. The reality is that what we have is a situation where ultimately it's our responsibility. And adhering to the Constitution, I mentioned that I'm a member of Oath Keepers, and it's somewhat of a misunderstood group. Some people think that they're extremists, and I remind people that is it really extreme to want people to actually pay attention to the law and to honor their oath? And if it is, then call me an extremist. But we'll do a program on that as well. But because we're concerned about people actually being honorable people, and understanding that to be honorable, we have to do honorable things. And when we understand that annihilating someone who is not the cause of the problem in an unwanted pregnancy, we know one thing for sure. That unborn child, that individual who is our posterity, that unborn descendant who's specifically named in the Constitution, had nothing to do with creating the problem. And we don't have an honorable society when we have a society that ignores the reality that the problem is caused by people who have irresponsible behavior, perhaps, and there is no justification whatsoever for punishing those who did not cause the problem. It is a scenario that no one would want to live by that code, whether it's in the United States or anywhere else. We talk about fundamental principles. You know that our website, FundamentalHumanRights.Org, is based upon these fundamental rights upon which many of the aspects of the Constitution are based. You know, they're not some new idea that came up and they just decided to put those in the Constitution. Men, and I use that term to cover all human beings, for generations, you know, they've sought the right and just solutions to their problems, and in order to do that, they've asked themselves the difficult questions. We've asked a difficult question here. Who is specifically named in the Constitution to receive its benefits? You and I know who is named. You and I have an obligation. If our elected officials will not do what they're supposed to do, it does not permit us to stand by and allow it to continue to happen, because at that point we could never call ourselves honorable from that point forward. So what I'm asking you to realize is a couple things. Ultimately, the responsibility rests with us. And as we talked about the scenario, someone being tied to a tree, if there was an individual standing off to the side and they saw this group surrounding you, getting ready to annihilate you, cause you pain and suffering, would you want that individual to do something in order to save your life? I'm willing to bet the answer to that is going to be absolutely yes. Would we want them to even risk their safety, maybe even their life, in order to recognize the injustice that's happening and to save your life as an innocent person? You have done nothing to deserve what they're doing to you. And that individual who recognizes that, every single one of us, that's what fundamental human rights is based upon. Virtually all people agree with these fundamental principles. Virtually everyone who would put themselves in that position, we know that we would all want someone to step forward. Well, we're that person standing on the sideline. And we have people who can't speak to us, but we can see with clear eyes exactly what is happening. And I've presented to you the means by which we can protect them, and have identified the fact that we have an absolute obligation to do so. A professor who deals with constitutional law once said this is the only thing that he's ever seen that could overturn Roe versus Wade. And he is absolutely right. We need to do that. We don't need to go through the procedure, spending months and years debating Roe versus Wade. We need to do the one thing that we know to do. As this person who's standing on the sideline, we need to gather others so we maybe have a better chance of not risking our own life when we're trying to rescue this individual. And so we can get with other people who are good, decent human beings, who understand this issue, who will stand with us. And I've always said, you know, if you can do something with others, that's great. But if it's a matter of principle, if you have to do it alone, a responsible individual, an honorable person, will do what must be done. And I'm asking you to do that. I'm asking you to do it the easy way. Get together with some people that you know and say, we need to stand against this. Go to your politicians. And some of the things that we specifically need to do is to let your officials know at the national, state, and local level that they have taken an oath to defend the Constitution, and the Constitution names two groups, and one of those groups is our posterity, which includes our unborn descendants. So they have an obligation to defend them. We have the obligation to defend them, and because we have that obligation, we will not stand for their misbehavior in office and permit them to continue to hold office if they do not do what they have taken an oath to do. I've said before, this is all up to you. And responsibility really is about us. If our politicians are not paying attention, we need to send them a letter specifically identifying the facts that I've indicated here, and indicate that you want them to step forward and announce that we will protect our unborn descendants, but we need them to indicate that they will do it, and they need to do it publicly. And then they need to, if they're a member of Congress, if they need to go that far in order to hold a special session, or if Congress is in session, they need to make it a priority. And why do they need to make it a priority? Because if we were the individuals who were about to be annihilated, exterminated, would we want someone to wait and say we have to have a hearing? That is not our idea of law in the United States. We do not execute people and then have a trial later. So we want these officials to act, and we're going to act immediately. So you can send these officials a registered letter with a return receipt requested, so you know that they've received it. And you can tell them that you want to hear back from them immediately. And if you don't, you should be on that phone. You should call their phones continually. Get everyone you know to call them and insist that they honor their oath and they defend those of the second group named in the Constitution to receive its benefits. If they continue not to do that, you keep up the pressure. You send them another letter. You get a return receipt requested. You stay in contact with us. Let us know what you're doing. Coordinate with us so that we can have a concentrated effort to get this done as quickly as possible, because individual lives are on the line, and we're not people who will stand by when someone is going to lose their life unjustly. You know, this is honorable people, honorable nation. And you've heard me say it before, you cannot have an honorable nation if we will not be honorable people. We've concentrated on this issue because all the other things that we will address, and believe me, there are a lot that we have to address. You know, we have many officials who are doing as they choose to do in violation of the Constitution and their oath of office. Yet we have an immigration policy that is insanity. We have politicians who are standing up and saying that we want to take various firearms away from people or make them criminals because they possess them, and they fail to understand the principle that we have a fundamental human right to security, to be able to make sure that good, decent, honest people are able to continue their existence. And as you all know, many of these officials are surrounded by people with all kinds of firearms because they are cowards to stand before the American people, who they know, some of whom can be violent, whether they have firearms or not. So they love to go by a standard for themselves and one for us that does not give us the ability to protect and defend not only ourselves, but the innocent. I say to you that among the most innocent are unborn descendants who have done nothing to deserve death and an extermination, And those who preach that are nothing short of evil. And I can say that because I know that every single one of them would agree that they would never want to be treated the way an unborn child is treated. We have the means to stop this slaughter now. But it won't happen unless you decide that you are going to stand as honorable people so we can once again have an honorable nation. We've renamed this the Detective Dan Devlin Show because I am about facts and I have given you the facts. And if somebody questions that, if there is any doubt in anyone's mind, as I've said before, at minimum, we need to protect those unborn children immediately. You can call them a fetus, a zygote, whatever you choose to call them. They are the posterity of the people of the United States. And they are named in the Constitution as the object of all we do. You have some tools available to you. You have the United States Constitution. You have these programs that we produced because, as a military person, I swore an oath also. Having been in war, men did not make it back from the war that I was in. And I've pledged to them that I will not allow their nation to become something other than what they fought and died to provide, not for themselves, but for their posterity. I'm Dan Devlin. Be that detective who looks for the facts. We provided them. This is honorable people, honorable nation. Go to our website, FundamentalHumanRights.Org, and join us. God bless you all.